Charles Olson said the tense of the mythic is present tense. So that's why I said present tense is preferred. Right around the time we started this, I had finished my graduate work at Lesley University, and I was studying open form in North American poetry, and then later revised that to organic poetry, which was the title of an essay. Well, actually, the title was Some Notes on Organic Form. But organic poetry is something that Denise Levertov and Robert Duncan were calling their approach to composing. And in fact, Denise said something very interesting in that essay. She said, all free verse is failed organic poetry, which I thought was fantastic. And I recommend that essay very, very highly. Some Notes on Organic Form. For Levertov to have written about theory and process in the 60s, along with all the boys, and have her work be fresh to this day was a real accomplishment, and she deserves a lot of kudos. She lived the last few years of her life down the street here in Seattle, and a few years ago we did a tribute to her at our Cascadia Poetry Fest, and we put a plaque at the house and where she lived, and I like to think of it as a high-class tagging. So I'm going to go back to the what I wrote in Rattle and what was published last year. Do write original poems for the project. Taking old poems and using them is not what we have in mind. This is also an experiment in community consciousness. Try to respond to cards that you get with subject, image, or any kind of link if possible. Often newsworthy events happen in August. How would our community respond? Letting a card that you receive linger for a while before you respond to the next person on your list is the preferred method. When you go to your mailbox each day, put the bills aside, read the poems you get, and think about them as you compose to the next person on your list. And so, I mean, you talk about things happening in the news this year, obviously. Pandemic, riots, lynchings, the craziness of our time. I mean, the pandemic now, just reading the news every day and, you know, seeing on CNN that's suggesting that we're at the most precarious moment in history of the United States of America, which is not surprising given the guy who's quote unquote running it. So spontaneity was a part of it from the very beginning, and I'm still very big on that. And I intend to do a Zoom workshop this fall called The Basics of Spontaneous Composition or something like that. So I'll be working on that, and it'll be a very low fee and a 6-week course. That's what I'm thinking about right now. So there are still people who cheat, and they write in their notebook, write out the poem, and then write on the card. And, you know, there's no POPO police, even though some people call the police POPO. But the essay that David Sherwin wrote about how sending postcards to strangers made me a better designer is a really beautiful essay, and that's linked on the POPO site, and I recommend that if you haven't looked at it. So there's the spontaneity of it, and then the next thing I think is real important is the seriality, and I'm very interested in serial form as practiced by Robert Duncan and many Canadian poets, George Bowering, Daphne Marlett, Fred Waugh, and others who came out of that New American Poetry anthology of 1959. T. Clear, who also lives very close here down the road, she wrote last year a series of moon poems. So every day she started a poem with where the moon was in the sky and what degree of fullness it was. And it was a beautiful series, and she read about 6 or 7 of them in a row at the open mic, and just fantastic. And I think seriality is one of the most open forms in all of art. And I love it because you don't have to come to some grand conclusion, because you can come to the same issue over and over and still not be definitive. Maybe have provisional conclusions, which then begin to evolve. When I interviewed Nate Mackey, he talked extensively about his approach to serial form, and I just loved it. So spontaneity and seriality. And we were pointing out cards that we were getting, and I pointed out this one that I got from Tim this year from an album cover. Anita Bryant, isn't that who it is? Oh, Jesus. Anyway, and so when I got that this year, it was on my mind, and I thought, I'm going to have to do something with that. So I had like I said earlier before we started recording, I took the waffle box. And so I'm going to send people big poems on the waffle box. And now it's here in my postcard mess on the side. So aside from those two things, you get in to start making your own cards. And that was something I saw happening, and I thought, I want to do that. So then the fest becomes multimedia. And then another thing you can do is people were sending me cool stamps on the card. And Walter Lowe is great at this and finding these 3-cent stamps from years and years ago and putting them on the postcard. And so I have a little stamp collection. Like if I'm going to write a poem about a bird, I still got one bird stamp left. And I don't know if you saw the Ellsworth Kelly stamps. I know these are letter stamps, but you know what? It's like postcard, the post office can use the help, and I'm happy to do that. We all saw the John Lennon stamps. I got a few of those. The Hendrix stamps, a few of those left, and so on and so forth. Gregory Hines stamps. So the stamp actually then becomes part of the composition, and maybe you can allude to that. Maybe it somehow fits in, like with my bird stamp. And then James and I were talking before we started, James Gaynor up there with the Northern Lights in the background. And we were talking about penmanship because I couldn't read all of his card. That was part of it. What did you say here exactly? I wanted to ask him. And he said he realizes doing the Postcard Fest, it's his first year, that maybe his penmanship isn't the best. And mine isn't either. And sometimes I use these roller pens and then they get smeary. And I know it has a Jackson Pollock-like effect, but it's not what I'm exactly going for. So even when it comes down to penmanship and what pen you use, this can be part of the whole meditation or ritual that I think POPO can be. And I've done it for 14 years, and there doesn't seem to be any bottom to the depth of how it can inform your life and how it can help you learn how to tune into your guidance. And that's one of the things that I will be talking about in the fall when I do this Basics of Spontaneous Composition. How do you tune yourself into, I think, your deepest self? William Carlos Williams said something to the effect of, I write because I want to know what I think. So the suggestion is that you are learning what you think by the process of writing. You're tapping into something larger than yourself. And that's the kind of thing I'd hoped for when I added this, the spontaneity part of that, or when I based this fest in part on the notion of spontaneity. So those are just some thoughts. I'm happy to elaborate on any of them in the question and answer period, but I want to be conscious of your time and conscious of the commitment that Judy Kleinberg and Ina made to participate in this. Now, these are two ladies who, when I said I'd really love to do a postcard anthology, they stepped up and they said, I'll help. And they created the beautiful 56 Days of August. And that's available online, Amazon.com. And so I'd like to bring Judy in. Judy, are you ready? Can you give me a thumbs up or something? You ready to go? Yeah. So I'd like to bring Judy in, let her take over and tell us a little bit about her approach to POPO. But you have to unmute yourself, or I could do it. But since there's 28 participants, oh, it's alphabetical. Here we go.
Okay, I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. So I'm going to give you a little perspective from the other side of the spectrum, where Paul is spontaneous and writing on those cards. I'm really, really organized, as both Paul and Ina will verify. They worked with me on the anthology. My mind frame is pretty organized, and I'll just give you a little perspective. Before I begin, I like to get things all set up. So one of the things I do is I print address labels for everybody in my group. And so as I go through the month, I just peel off those labels and stick them on the postcards. And that way I know that at least if the poem isn't legible or everything else fails, at least it'll get to the person because the post office can read the label. I also have little clear return address labels. And one of the things I'd really like to urge everybody to do is sign or put your name on your card, because it is really heartbreaking when you get a wonderful postcard and there's absolutely no evidence of who it's from. And sometimes we do these sort of unfolding the mystery in the Facebook group where everybody's trying to, well, I think the stamp said Seattle. Can we figure out who's in Seattle in group 7 and that sort of thing? It's great. Please put your name at least on your postcards. The other thing I do is I have a great, huge collection of postcards. And many of them are postcards that I've collected over the years from, who knows, random places, garage sales, wherever I can collect postcards. I also have a whole series of postcards that I created. This is a little embarrassing, but 40 years ago, I created a series of cards. I never quite got around to the entire alphabet, but I do have these alphabet cards. And I confess, a cheater. According to Paul's measure, I do all of my writing on the computer, and I do not edit, but I get my poems down on the computer and then I print them on my cards. So if any of you are in whatever group I'm in, I think I'm in group 2 this year, you might have received a card from me with a poem printed on it. That is a poem that was created that morning without edits, but it was then printed on the card. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this process, and as I mentioned, I've been doing this since 2011, is that it has become a year-round practice for me. At the very first fest that I participated in, it was like, oh, I get up every morning and I do this before I do anything else, before I check my email, before I listen to the news, before I get distracted by everything that's going on in the world. I sit down and I write this spontaneous poem. And that just seemed like a really great process. And I've kept doing it. And as a consequence, since 2011, I have some thousands of poems, and they're all quite short. They're postcard poems, basically. And I keep a record of them. That's another thing that I do, that this is really embarrassing, but I make a grid for my poems, and it lists the person that the poem is going to, what card the poem went out on, and then it actually has the text of the poem. So I find that having a record of what I've sent is really useful. I wanted to just mention quickly a couple of other things. Karen expressed a concern about postcards getting through the mail, and it is a concern, but I have received cards. I've got one in here from Abaya that it's on cardboard. And if you put enough postage on your card, the chances are better that it will go through. Also, a lot of people have had good luck actually going to the post office with their cards and getting them hand canceled. And although the post office has become a little bit more of a challenge these days, they're often fascinated by what we put in the mail, and your local people may be willing to cooperate. Do not assume that an oversized card can go for postcard rate, because it won't. You'll have to put regular letter postage on it. A couple of other things in terms of getting started. Paul mentioned using the image that's on the card, the card you're sending, the image that's on a card you received. I like to just look out the window And I find that there's a whole lot of inspiration right outside the window. And another thing that works for me really well is I use the last line of yesterday's poem as the first line in today's poem. And I am always really surprised at where it goes. It goes in a completely different direction than yesterday's poem, but it is that sort of magic of getting the thing onto the paper and getting started. So let's see. I also make an effort to respond to cards that I receive. We get quote bonus postcards, and I feel like it's really important if somebody sends you a card off list, respond to them. And just on that line, I really feel like the commitment to the month of postcards is important. I think even if you get stuck and your life just is chaotic, if you can take a minute and send somebody a postcard and say, I'm going to write a poem for you next year, but here's your postcard. It's just, I just feel like it's a really important commitment that we make when we sign up. So, and I just love getting postcards from everyone. It's just wonderful. And I thank you. And I think that's probably all I have to say for the moment. And I will mute myself and then we'll answer questions later. Okay?
Fantastic, Judy. I love also the notion of starting off the next poem where you left off on the last one. Michael McClure did that in his poem Dolphin Skull in 1995, and I've seen Sam Hamill do it. And I think it lends itself to seriality too, because you can kind of continue the thread or watch as the thread itself emerges. So that's something I've done. I think I did that last year, and it's a beautiful way to go. And Abea Thomas is definitely one of the rock stars. I don't know if you could see that or if it's got me on there, but that's, always look forward to getting her card or being in her group. So thanks. Okay, Ina. So keep in mind that Ina may have construction sounds, music sounds, or other things going on in the background. So we cut her some slack. And Ina, you're up. Do we have Ina here? Did he? Oh my God, is she not in the house? I've got to send her. Do I have to send her the link? Oh, Jesus.
Unmute. Hey, hello.
Oh, there she is. Okay, good. Woo.
Okay. For some reason, I'm not in speaker view, but okay. All right. Paul, I'm still seeing you. Hello?
I muted myself, so.
Okay, I'm still seeing you as the speaker. You may need to switch out. Oh, okay, as long as you guys can see me. Hi, Claudia. I'll just pretend that I can see myself. So I have been doing this for a lot of years. I don't remember how many, not as many as Judy, not as many as Paul, but a while. And I can see that some of the people who are on are people that I've had interactions with before. Hi to all the people who've been doing this with us for a few years. And I'm so happy to see you. One of the things that I love about this project every August is that I've made some poetry friends, and I love that. So if Judy is like the organized one, I am, let me put it this way, I have 4 cats and a dog, and that's the most organized part of my life. So I am the chaotic one. It's like, I have a box of postcards that are not in a nicely neat order like Judy's, and I stick my hand in and pull one out every day from a little before August and write. The one thing I do, like Judy, I keep a copy of the postcard and the day I sent it. In part, I will +1 on Judy because sometimes I've gotten like a note from someone saying, you know, I never got your postcard. And that way I know what I meant to send them and I can rewrite it and send it back. I also, for people who are new to this, I know that last year some people had talked about being a little intimidated by these gorgeous art postcards that people make. I have to show you, this is what I've gotten so far because some people started early during the pandemic. I got gorgeous art card. See that? Isn't that beautiful? It's so gorgeous. And I also got this. You know those ones that they sell in packs at the post office that you can decorate them? I used to teach, used to work in a children's library, and one of the things we do is have the kids decorate these cards. You don't have to decorate it. What counts is that it went in the mail with something about you. And that's, if you go back and read this essay that I wrote for Paul on why I keep doing this, writers are lonely people, right? Because at some point, even if you're in the car with 4 preteen boys all talking and you're sitting at like waiting for practice to start and you're writing on the postcard while they're all talking about Minecraft, in some sense, it's a lonely thing. So the chance to connect with other people with your words is a rare thing. And now with the quarantine, it's gotten even more rare. It's really hard to connect with people. I miss doing open mics. I have been wanting to go back up to Seattle and see a lot of the people who have done the Postcard Fest and other things. And I can't because I cannot get on a plane. I live in a hot spot and it's not very much fun right now. So I can't go anyplace. So this is one chance to connect. And it's a really, I think, important one for those of us where our words matter. Don't worry about whether your postcards are beautiful. Don't worry if the words aren't perfect. If you really want to go and use your poems later, like to publish them or to put them out in the world in some other way, you can always edit it. But that first spontaneous outpouring, in a way, that's like talking to the person with a little bit of a delay, a couple of days delay. If they're overseas, maybe a week and a half delay, but you're actually talking to them and you don't stop, I hope, and edit all your words when you're conversing with friends. Every once in a while, but not usually. This is the same possibility that you can just talk to somebody else. And for me, that's the most beautiful part of this. So I'm going to show you a couple of other examples of things I've gotten. There's this. I think this was created. Actually, Tim is here. He could probably tell us after I'm done talking whether that was created. This one was just a preprint, looks like from Penguin. Let's see, what else do we have? This one also looks like it was a preprint, and I loved it because scary clowns, always a good thing. In terms of whether you handwrite, I have doctor writing and it's terrible. And I'm guessing about 80% of the people who get my postcards have no idea what I'm saying because crucial words are like little scribbles. My son has a disorder where he cannot handwrite. So he did it last year and he typed and pasted his poems onto postcards. So there's lots of ways to do this. The main thing is to just do it, for 31 days, do it longer if you want, but just go out there and reach out to the other people and they will reach out to you. And that is where I'm going to stop because it looks like we have tons of questions.
Far out, Ina, really beautiful. Thank you. You know, you mentioned something and immediately I thought of Sigrid Saradan and the experience that she had. And I realized she's the person who I was referring to as Siggy because that's what it said. But if Sigrid, if you're there and you can unmute and tell us a little bit about what you were going through. Let me see. I can unmute you, but you can unmute yourself if you can. And if you'd like to pop in, that would be great. Also, while we're on that, maybe Judy, you can unmute yourself. And Ina, one of the questions we got from Sue Pivetta was epistle. I read that should be the type of poetry, but the samples were not consistent. So would like to hear about expectations about epistle. You're shaking your head, Ina, so I suspect you have something to say about that.
No, I'm actually shaking my head because I don't know what that means. So I'm hoping for some.
Well,
I can go there.
All right, go ahead.
Excellent.
So epistle is basically a letter to someone. And it's a form that's used extensively in poetry. And I think I have to say, I believe really strongly, in spite of how organized I am, that there are no shoulds. There really are no rules about this.
Yep.
Put the postcard together, however you are moved to do so, get a stamp on it and put it in the mail. The epistle form is basically the idea is that underlying the form, even if you don't say, "Dear Paul," where it's coming from in your heart is "Dear Paul," or "Dear Ina," or "Dear Penelope," or whoever you're addressing. You don't have to use those words, but I think that when we write directly to someone, we elicit a more nuanced and personal sort of language and heartfelt experience. And I think that that's the reason that epistle is suggested as a format. If you want to start out your poem by saying, "Dear Paul," that's great. Maybe it will help you address something very specific to Paul. If you don't want to use that format, go wherever you're inclined to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answer. I see that Sigrid is unmuted. Sigrid, do you want to talk about the experience you had?
I'd had an unfortunate experience in January and ended up at my son's house. And that helped. And then I got home on February 29th. And on the 4th, my painting pal of 25 years passed away. And I knew I can't talk anymore. And then it was his memorial was when you could have 50 people. 2 days later, it was 10 people. And then my a friend passed away with a tragic accident in a golf cart. The golf cart malfunctioned and he flew forward. And his wife of 54 has been 54 years has been my friend since 9th grade. And I'm here with my cat who doesn't care. And I was really, I had all these hopes to start writing and doing my cards right away. And I somehow somebody wrote something and I think I made a message. I don't know. But all of a sudden these cards started coming to me and I didn't feel alone anymore. I live in a small town and everybody in my group is, I'm the baby. I'm 76, I'm the baby. And my friend who passed away was 94. And we spent about 15 hours a week together. And he was my inspiration in my sort of, I don't know, he was sort of like a mentor. How can you be a free spirit at 94? But he was. And I felt so alone. And I don't know what I wrote, but all of a sudden these cards started coming. And some days I wouldn't feel like doing anything, and I have someone bring me my mail. And they said, "You've got more postcards." And I go, "Oh," and they don't people just don't understand. And they think I'm a hippie anyway. And so these postcards have pulled me through. And then the funeral for the man who died April 1st, his funeral was a couple weeks ago. And somehow these postcards carried me through this time. And I felt lighter after the funeral, but I have the postcard sitting next to me so I can go through them. And some days I must have been, I don't even remember getting them, but they're in this pile, so I'd read them again.
How many did you get?
I don't know. I haven't counted them yet because some got misplaced, but there at least has to be 30.
There you go.
And they always seem to arrive on a critical day, and from people I don't know, and some that I do. And I kept wondering, how do people know I need these? And I didn't know I needed them, I'll be honest. But I'm here in this small town, and my family's moved away. My daughter's in Grapevine, Texas, with her daughter. I'm talking children. They're 25 and older. And so the oldest granddaughter is in Mesquite. And then in Colorado, where I sought refuge after I had a problem that was very earth-shaking. And it ended up with my daughter and myself not speaking, to be honest. And I couldn't deal with that. But my son and his wife, who I don't know, I do now. After 25 years, she took me in. And they helped me mail some postcards. I just, the postcard thing sort of kept me through. You know, February was Peace Month. And they helped me through that. And I've got this beautiful great-grandson now. And you just don't know what it's like to receive something, even if you do. It's like a pen pal.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys old enough?
We know a little bit about that, and we're grateful that POPO.
So anyway, I'm so grateful.
We're grateful that you're part of the community, and we've got a couple of questions. What I'd love is if Claudia Long, who has a question, and then Lynn Caldwell could unmute themselves and ask the question of our panelists or of POPO regulars and go from there. So Claudia, you ready?
Fine. Okay. So I didn't expect that I was going to say something, but here I am. And Ina answered my question already. I'm new at this, and I'm generally a novelist, long form, and really want to do this. My husband's a poet. Who knows Ina? Anyway, and I wanted to do it, but I thought we waited until August 1st, just like NaNoWriMo, you wait till November 1st, and you don't do it before. And Ina said, no, people do them all the time. So I'm a little confused. Am I supposed to wait, not wait? I want to wait.
Let me elaborate on my answer. Is that okay, Paul?
Yeah.
The structure is a couple of days before August 1st, you send your first one so that your first one arrives August 1st.
I see.
Paul contacted Judy and I and a couple of other people earlier when lockdown started and said, what do you think about starting earlier? And I was like, yes, because I'm like in about 50 high risk categories. And so I'm trapped and I'm going nuts. And it was like, please, let's start early. And so some people started early. Some people do wait until right before August or in, right on August. Paul, any other thoughts about this? I mean, there are people who do it all year round. Like they take the whole list and they send out once a week after August is over.
Yeah, we had 52 one year. The Peace Postcard Fest that Sigrid was talking about was started by a couple of Bellinghamsters. And so that happens in February, and that's a shorter month, so you only have to commit to 28 days. I'd really love for Judy to pop in and tell us what she thinks, and then I'll tell you what I think.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm in group 2, which means I think I got the list, I don't know, March or something like that. It was filled pretty fast. And I got off to sort of a sluggish start, but then started working through the list. I have now sent postcards to everybody on the list and probably half a dozen bonus cards just because I have a list of people that I send cards to. And I think I've received 5 or 6. So it's not even. People are not all sending out at the same rate. And I would say if you're eager to get started, get started. If you want to wait and you like that discipline of saying, for me, it's actually easier to say, I'm going to do this every single day. I did the 52 last year, whenever it was, a couple years ago. And I had sort of a hard time rousting myself once a week and saying, oh, is this the postcard day that I'm going to, so I would say, do whatever feels best for you. Just work your way through that list.
Thanks, Judy. I'm this year was an exception because of the shelter in place. And next year, it's not going to be that way. It's going to be 4th of July. The first lists will go out. And we changed a few years ago. We started getting the list after the 4th because people sign up right away. It was great to see these. I wake up in the morning and there'd be already, 60 or 70 people signed up, and there was quite a rush. And it was also very difficult to get the lists out with all the corrections that happened and all the emails that were flying. But the way I figured it, the math I did at the time was you sign up on July 4th, you get your list on July 5th, you start writing on the 6th, and you have till the end of August to write your 31 poems. So it became a 56-day season, if you will. So that's how the name 56 Days of August got started. And if there's one month out of the year that I felt was best to extend, it would be August, the year that here in the Pacific Northwest, and I'll give you a sense of my poetry window, right?
Wow.
Right? So in August, we're like, sorry, we're backpacking. Sorry, we're kayaking. Sorry, we're going somewhere in nature because it's going to be raining before long and we want to get out there. And so it seemed to me that would be the perfect month to extend, August. So 56 days of August. And it's also kind of a knock against this whole kind of Protestant work ethic culture where you can never take any time off, or if you're lazy, if you do this, or being in the spirit of Walt Whitman, where you can loaf for a month if you consider writing poems loafing, which I don't necessarily. Then there's the question of August Poetry Postcard Fest. And it's like, wait a minute, if you're starting in July, or in this case, starting in March, how can you still call it August? And I say, well, you can make that a lowercase a and make it the August Poetry Postcard Fest. And so that's part of why we call it a POPO, because that way the August is downplayed, and the poetry postcards, which comes directly from Terry Holtzman, who she started calling it POPO, and she thought at first, I don't know if Paul's going to like that, and we love it. And so we got the URL this year, POPO.cards. That's how we love it so much. So we want to call it POPO from now on. It's more fun, and people can remember that easier. I think that might have answered Lynn Caldwell's question as well. And I see that there's a chat going on in the chat room. So how about any other questions? Anyone else have any questions, comments, rebuttals?
Somebody actually, Sue asked about when she can expect her names because she just signed up, and I'm sure a lot of people who are recent signers up are probably wondering that.
Yeah. So as soon as we get 32 names and all the addresses are good, somebody signed up, didn't put their email address, didn't put their address, didn't put their phone number. And so my only recourse is to attempt to communicate to them through Submittable. And about 8 days ago, I said, we want to know what address we should send our postcards to, and nothing. So that person, I keep bumping them down because I think two groups, well, at least one group has gone out since then. And group 14 is forming now. And we had a bunch of people sign today because an email went out from popo.cards. And my guess is that there's about 20 people in that list. So I'm going to wait till it gets to 32 and I can read that all the addresses are close to being perfect. And so depending on how many people respond to the email, it could be in the next couple of hours, next couple of days, or it could take several days. So for those who just signed up and are going to be in group 14, that's the deal. And I'm quickly finishing my list. I love that Judy showed her list, but I have the same thing where I got my list and what number of postcard I send to them and what the date is. And being the Virgo that I am, I've been dating these or numbering these postcards since the beginning. So I wrote my 927th postcard of my postcard career and the 55th of the season to Megan Baldridge of Albuquerque. And I think it was about Joe Lovano's hat, because I saw the tenor saxophonist play at the Village Vanguard, which is now doing streaming. And I liked his hat so much, I thought, I'm just going to start taking my hat fashion from Joe Lovano. So I got the hat, the pork pie hat, the Joe Lovano special. So I hope that in some way answers the question. Any other questions that I missed, Ina, that you saw? I'm seeing you responding to Rima about getting postcards from Australia 2 months later.
Right.
Then
People are wondering about international postcards and because there's a delay.
Right. Some people, when they see international folks on their list, they get them a postcard right away. They just vault them to the top of their list, which is cool. Of course, you have to have that international stamp. Very important to have the proper amount of postage. And I've got a few of those somewhere. The stash, I used one today. It's in my postcard stash. Anyway, it's like $1.20 stamp or whatever. And they're the forever stamps. So you have to have one of those round ones, which I can't find quickly now. But yeah.
Got them right here next to me, Paul.
There you go. Can you show them up? There we go. There you go.
Hey, it's Rich.
Oh, hey, Tim's got some too. Hey, Tim.
Yeah, so there you go. And so to make sure you have the proper postage, and I think putting people internationally, of course, if you're an international participant, then who do you put first? And in that case, I don't know how important it is. And Rich, did you get my poem with a dinosaur sticker on it? Did you get that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
So, you know, while we got him on talking about dinosaurs, you know, that's the thing. We see him on Facebook, for instance. If you're on Facebook, which if you're not, I understand and envy you in many ways. But if you are, there's a beautiful Facebook group that I think was helpful in getting those cards to Sigrid or spreading the word and creating community. But Rich, you got a thing about dinosaurs, and I know that. So in my bag of postcard tricks, I've got all kinds of things I can glue to a postcard, things I get out of a laboratory catalog, like danger stickers or radioelectric stickers or freeze upon receiving or keep frozen stickers, and then a bunch of stickers. And when I saw the book of dinosaur stickers, I immediately thought of Rich and thought, I'm going to stick this on his card. So can you tell us a little bit about the dinosaur motif while we're at it?
You know, it's one of those things, it started out as an innocent joke. I was posting a photograph of their very high quality toys, dinosaur toys, and I would just post them and put them in different poses and have a funny comment. And one of my friends said, hey, why don't you let us do the comments? And that was back in 2016. So now every day we've had a new dinosaur photo. So it's not like I'm obsessed with anything or it's not my business. I've always had kind of I always kind of liked them. And it's kind of a fun thing to do.
So, Rich, I think you should know that these two dinosaurs have been working at it for a very long time.
Those the same species?
No.
Okay. And we're okay.
Oh my God. Lost my train of thought there for a second.
I'm so glad I tuned in. Sorry I'm late, but I'm Presbyterian, so I had to work.
I see. Well, very good. Kristen pops in. Kristen, do you want to state your comment and then have us address it?
Let me unmute. Am I here?
Yes.
I was just thinking how it's great to see everyone. I just love this practice so much for all the reasons that people have stated, but I'm going to try and combine the seriality, ekphrasic, epistle together. So I like the idea of that.
I started making my own cards because I started getting cards and I thought those are cool. I'd like to do that. And that's kind of a weak point with me, the whole graphic thing. And then a couple of years ago, I got the idea that if I just went to FedEx and put my URL there in the middle of a blank card and take the form of the postcard with a little place for the stamp and the lines, although I would redesign this now to make it 4 lines and make them a little smaller. But then what I've been doing this year is I start to paint them a little bit. And I was doing Cascadia Flags, which have a green stripe on the bottom and a blue stripe on top and a Douglas fir in the middle. That's the quote unquote official flag of the bioregion of Cascadia, which goes to Cape Mendocino, California, to Mount Logan, Alaska, and then to the Continental Divide, and is sounding a lot more enticing these days, especially if the election doesn't go the right way. So anyway, what I'll do is now I will write the poem on the back of the card, and then I will create the image. So,
Ah,
for example, I wrote a poem about Joe Lovano's hats. Joe Lovano's a tenor saxophonist who I met in New York when I was there to visit my daughter, May of 2019. And the Village Vanguard has been streaming again. Just watched a show last night, which is fantastic. Paid $10, and it's almost like you're in the Vanguard, and the jazz is incredible. So I took a screen grab of Joe Lovano playing saxophone with that beautiful hat. And then what I did was I manipulated the size of the image in a Pages file so that it would fit, and I could stick some stuff around it. I think I stuck a sticker of the map of New York on there, some other things. And it went to a person in Ohio, and Lovano is from Cleveland originally. So I think I made some reference to that. But it seems to me like a reverse ekphrastic. Ekphrastic, of course, is a work of art about another work of art. So poems about painting or a specific painting, for example, are your traditional ekphrastic. And there's a great book that I think came out of the Art Institute of Chicago, which got into a lot of ekphrastic art. But to create the poem and then the image, for me, brings a little bit of coherence that I really haven't had so much in years past regarding the image and the content relating. And so now they're a little better, and Bhakti tells me that the images are getting better too. So that's part of the ekphrastic thing. Who's next? Who has a question, comment? All right, we have from Olympia. I can't hear you. Maitri, I can't, you're unmuted, but you're not coming through. There's some, maybe you could type it in the chat and we can have your comment relayed. So, we're coming up at about an hour into this. And so just, if there's anyone else with a question, you could pop in now, unmute yourself. I see Lucia Sanford has her hand up, it looks like. Maybe not, maybe not. Well, we'll wait for Maitri to pop in.
Can you?
Now Lucia's there.
Sorry, this is all so new to me.
Yeah.
Last year you had to send out an emphatic email telling people not to post poems that they receive from others on the internet. And I wonder if you just talk a bit about not doing that and why not, because and why maybe it happened more last year than in the past, because I'm hoping to come away from the conversation today with some renewed confidence, because I felt pretty strongly shocked by that, and don't quite know how to put that into words. I'm just going to trust everybody here would understand why I would feel shocked and kind of really betrayed by that idea, and
betrayed by the idea of
that I could send out poetry. Now I think this might be that we had so many new people participating last year, and maybe some were young or something and don't understand that you don't take someone's poem that you've been sent and put it on the internet. It's like I send a poem to someone and that person takes that poem and puts it on the internet with or without my name on it.
Yeah. Well,
that instance, you know,
yeah.
I need some conversation about that before we go, if you guys wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, it's been in the guidelines right away. Don't publish it. I think it's even in red ink, if I'm not mistaken. There were a couple of things that happened in the beginning, and that was one of them. And so let me talk about the other one first. The other one was somebody decided they have a list of whatever it was, the first year or the second year. And I think it was the first year, got a list of the addresses of 130 poets. Why not send them a card that promotes my book, is what they thought. And we're like, no, don't, that's spam. Don't spam the list. Go on POPO and make an announcement on the Facebook page. That is a good way of doing it. It's a way of, keeping us informed about what you're doing. Don't post every poetry thing you've ever done there or everything that's going on, but special things like your book, that would be cool. So we had to make that clear. Please don't spam the list. And then last year there was some controversy, not because somebody put something online. As I recall, a teacher put the poems that she got up in her classroom.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mm.
I thought that was okay because that was showing creativity. It was the cards that she got. Someone did not like that at all. And as a result, quit and is no longer involved in the fest and had been involved in the fest in a long time. So the notion is that somebody's sending you a card and it's yours to own, but it's not necessarily yours to publish. And so some people are cool with it. You know, if you emailed me and said, hey, I want to do this with it, I would probably be cool with it. But to check in with that person is a good idea. And I will often connect people by responding and BCCing the person or doing something like that, or finding a way or sending them an email and connecting them if they want to do that. So people are very particular about that. And I understand that. A lot of people are being very particular about their name and address going out to 424 people. So a tradition we used to have where we would send you all the participants once registration was over is something I think that's going to be discontinued because so many people are saying, please leave me out of it, that, you know, the idea of juggling 2 or 3 different lists is going to make it more complicated than it needs to be. So Lucia, I hope that answered your question.
Paul, can I
Yeah.
can I add? You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think part of the concern is that some of us take the poetry side of it fairly seriously, and we also take the first draft intent of the postcard process fairly seriously. So what we're sending out are really rough drafts of something that we may eventually decide, oh, this could be a poem in some
Exactly.
future life. So we're taking a risk every time we send a poem out. And the idea that somebody would take that poem and that it's going to represent us, even with our name, you know, is sort of distressing. So I think that the rule, the suggestion not to post other people's poems is in part in response to that. And I think that that's really valid.
Thanks everybody.
I was going to say that am I okay? I was going to
Yes,
say
go ahead, Rich.
that I found, and don't take my wording, or it's just the way I looked at it. I found some of the poems that I've gotten over the years shockingly personal. And it's maybe that you just had to get your thoughts down and send it to somebody. So definitely, if I were to pour out my emotions like that, I wouldn't want somebody posting them.
And practical level for a lot of publications, if you're going to rewrite the poem and send it to like a printed work or something like that, once it's out on the internet, they will consider it published,
Right.
and they won't let you use it anymore. With the case of the teacher putting poems up for their kids, to me, that feels differently, but the point is to me. So what you want to do is contact the person if you're interested in using their poem and find out, you know, it's just respectful.
Tim.
Yeah, once they were in the anthology, they were fair game though, right? Because I've been reading those poems to people repeatedly.
Well, I think
shared them on the radio show and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, if it's
once they're published.
Yeah, I think it's a published book. That's a different story. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Maitri says, I make a painting and then cut it into 31 individual parts. I am also not a poet, but that's okay.
That's
Absolutely.
okay.
I would love to see visual artists. In fact, one in Portland, friend of the family, group 6, was it? She's not here. Group 6, I think, Dominic Anaya. So if you got a postcard from him, you're lucky because those are beautiful cards as well. And the poem is a bonus in a case like that. Somebody else had their hand up, I saw. It's hard to, with this whole little grid thing. I see that Linda Crossfield is in the house, and here's
Yay.
who's been doing it since day one. So I don't know, Linda, if there's any thoughts you have about it, but I thought I'd give you a couple of minutes to pop in, to unmute yourself and say hello.
I'm unmuted. Good morning, everybody. It's so neat to see your faces. Some of you I've been corresponding with on and off for some time now. Hi, Judy. Hi, Ina. Yeah, I haven't actually started this year yet, and I'm in group 1, so I've had my list for months now. and everything seems like months now. But I tell you that after listening to all this morning, I know where I'm going after this. I'll be getting going on it. I think I'm going to try making a few of my own this year too.
Do you want to talk about what you like, some of the organizing principles? I forget the one, Nancy, was it a Nancy Drew thing that you did, or can you talk about that?
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I usually have something that I attempt to write to each year. One year I had a bunch of Nancy Drew postcard covers of her first 30 books or something. So all my poems that year were around her. Another year I took the Griffin Anthology of Poetry. Griffin's a big poetry prize in Canada and internationally. And took a line from each of the 4 poets that were in the book and did something with that, you know. And this year I'm really liking the idea. I think Judy mentioned it first and I came in about 15 minutes late, so I may have missed something. But this, starting with the last line that you left off with, because then you get this serial poem effect, and I'm getting very interested in serial poems. So I think that may be where I'll be going this year, and I'm quite excited at the prospect. So yeah.
All right. Thanks, Linda.
Thank
14 years of POPO for Linda and me and Judy Jensen and a few others who I can't think of right then. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up at least the recording part of this. I'm going to hang out for a while, but so often you do this, you send out your 31 cards, or in my case, I'm working on a second group and haven't decided yet about a third group, but I may have to fill out part of group 14. So I may be signing up again, but then, you know, you often don't hear about it. Did you ever get it? I don't know, you know, and so to connect the faces of people and the voices, if you chimed in with the names that we've seen so many years, is really a beautiful thing for me. And, you know, you talk about personal cards. I've been writing about my own health issues, writing about dealing with prostate cancer, and writing some very personal poems about what I feel is sort of the psychic implication of that. And they've been very cathartic, but I think deeper than therapy for me. I think they go beyond a therapeutic thing. I think they go to the level of personal mythology for me. I like to think that. And I wrote an essay about levels of consciousness for my graduate work about 14 or so years ago. And I think that's a really deep level to get to. Intimate, yes, and also deep if you do it right, and hopefully not maudlin. So I'm happy about those cards. And I even sent the PDFs. I dropped them off at my doc, my radiation oncologist. So yeah, please don't publish people's work. Please talk to them. Please get in touch with them. The Facebook group is a great way to connect with POPO folks. And if you need to, you can always call, text, email, or postcard me. And I try to respond very quickly. I was trained by Airbnb to try and respond within seconds. And I'm backing off that now, since I'm not doing Airbnb, since there's almost nobody traveling these days. But to all of you, thank you for being part of this community. I'm going to hang out for a while. And special thanks, please, can you unmute yourself? Let me see, can I unmute all? I don't know. So if you can unmute yourself and give a hand to Judy and to Ina for being part of this. That would be good. A hand.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you.